that really you just need the closest tip of the point to be as correct as it possibly can be, and then the rest is just kind of aesthetics. If it looks like a tiny shiv when you're done, you probably did a good job. Safety rating of all of these things is none of them care about your blood. They will remove your blood from you if you are not paying attention. So I'm just very carefully going to put it together. This should be straightforward. If when you're making Gunpla it doesn't look like this, I don't know what you're doing. Welcome back. So today we're actually going to try start to finish to make a tool that I found on the internet, and I would like to share how to make that tool. So today is going to be a bit longer and a bit more in depth on process. So first things first, pick out pieces of steel. I am going to make this a few different ways, so I'm going to pick out a couple pieces. These are thick and cut-offs from knives. Other good steel that is hardenable that will work is spring steel from like hobby wire. Like you can walk into a hobby shop right now, ask for landing gear wire, get the thickest stuff that they have, and shape that the way that I'm going to shape it now. You do have to anneal it first because it is already way too hard to file. But I digress. So it's not cheap to make if you don't have the tools. If you already have the tools, then you are looking at an investment that is higher than buying the thing that is already offered by a professional on the internet. That being said, a vise, a hand file, and sandpaper with a flat surface of some kind is almost all you need to make it. So hand filing, I love it. It is laborious. It makes you sweaty. It hurts. And if you get good at it, it can be pretty quick. It makes a lot less mess than like power tools. But you can get an extreme amount of control. And if you have a big hand file, which you can get a 9-inch bastard file, fun to say, fun to be. Oh, gross. You're going to leave that in. You can get a 9-inch bastard file from Home Depot for like $10. You can do all of your shaping with that. I just happen to have a small collection of files that I'm using. A rough one, or I guess I would say coarse, but honestly, you just need a big one and a fine one. And the fine one can also be big, but I'm getting to in the details. Some things to look out for. Keep your work low in the vise. It is important for hand filing to minimize vibration. If it sounds bad, it's not good. That's the best sentence I have ever said. So I've switched to a fine hand file. I've already gotten my profile done in here. But generally, you only want to put pressure on the forward stroke. If you put light pressure on a backstroke just to keep yourself level, I don't care. In general, if you lift your file, that's cool. Also, very important, deburr your work. Hand filing creates edges that go outside of what you've been doing, so just keep that in mind. Don't hurt yourself is a higher priority than try to make a tool. But anyway, everything's profiled, but keeping your work low in the vise, using not a Herculean amount of pressure, but just enough pressure that you can feel it cutting and you can see flakes or chips of metal coming off. Because essentially, you are just cutting with thousands of strokes every time you pull back or pull forward. Let's not get into language semantics. This is on the back of the tool. There is a part separator, so there needs to be a point that sort of a triangular point that comes to an edge, and there needs to be a part separator on the back. Need is a very strong word for want. I wanted to see if I could do it, and you're seeing this, so I did. I'm not hiding all of my mistakes, but this was a successful result in the end. Now, when the surface that you're filing is wider, or the more surface area that you are filing, the slower everything is going to go. Just be patient. If you're going with the hand file method, at the very least. We will do the, I'm going to call it the fast version of this later on in the video, but I wanted to make sure that you were sufficiently bored and you had to hear me talk way more than you needed to, just so that you could get, just so that you can skip forward and see what's going on, which is fine. Your time is important. But hand shaping, hand filing, this is, everything is in sort of a rough mode. If you do use a vise, you can do this in your hands, but it's going to go extremely slowly. If your vise is connected to a table and it's like bolted in there, all of a sudden your vise becomes a like 500, 600 pound vise just because it has more weight to what it's connected to. And that way all of your force doesn't go into vibration, it goes into cutting. So I'm satisfied with this profile. I'm satisfied with the way this feels. I'm trying to make sure that this part separator isn't sharp. It actually has to be rounded. I'm using a diamond plate here. You can use sandpaper. At some point, I shift to sandpaper for some other things, just because, honestly, it's faster. Sandpaper just gets a little costly, and it's also, it gets a bit more. It's not easy to keep it flat. 169. Anyway, we'll get into the weeds on that later. I just wanted to make sure that the tip of my chisel was at a flat 90. I am marking up these guys unnecessarily on the sides. I think I'm just having fun. Don't get blue dye come on your hands. But I'm marking the center because I do want to have something that I don't normally have, which is a precise angle on this thing. So for the two thick boys I have going right now, they're going to be, I think, 12.5 degrees on 12.5 or 13 degrees for the point on each side. It's going to come to a point of a combination of 2 times 12.5 or 13. So I think it's 26, or maybe it's 13.5. I think it was a 27-degree cutter, I think is what I decided to make, because that is a number that I saw on the internet. Or was it a 13-degree cutter? Look up the degrees that you would like to make your tool, and then cut them to that specification. So I digress. I'm putting this in the vise now more flat, and I am just attacking it very, very carefully. It's a big file, but if it's larger and wider, it's a little easier to keep it flat, which is important. You do want to try to keep it as flat as you can, but you're not selling this. This is something that you can just wing and make it good enough. If you make it good enough at the point, this tool gets so little area that it has to cut with that really you just need the closest tip of the point to be as correct as it possibly can be, and then the rest is just kind of aesthetics. If it looks like a tiny shiv when you're done, you probably did a good job. If you're watching this now and you're thinking, I don't know if I could do a good job, I didn't do a good job, so I kept I kept filing. Just keep filing. It's fine. If you end up with dust, you probably did something right. But anyway, so I first attacked the sides, and now I'm actually going for the chisel point. So this is where I got a little confused, and I wanted to see if I wanted to figure out what to do, but the main goal is 45 degrees-ish to bring that triangle down to its point. And I don't want to file more into the shape that I just filed for the point. So to get to the point, make a triangle, and then make it a sharp triangle on the top and make it flat on the bottom. And if I'm feeling judicious or merciful, I will have a visual aid that makes this a little easier to see, other than the nightmare garbage town that is my shop bench right now. And to spare you from some more filing, at the very least, I showed you the start. I wanted to profile it down so that it had a less aggressive, or less sort of curved look. I wanted it to be more pointed slash needly. You'll see. Needly is also the wrong word. And the block of wood under the diamond plate is just so that it has some support and I don't actually push the diamond plate out of the vice jaws, which has happened. And it will happen again. But now I am just polishing the surfaces. Again, you can do this with sandpaper. You don't need. I think this stupid plate was $100. It's lasted longer than $100 worth of sandpaper over a course of. Oh man, I've had that thing for a long time. It's been a long time since I've had it. Probably 7, 8 years. Never had to replace it. Stayed as flat as I needed it to be. If you're an experienced knife maker or machiner, flat is relative. And that thing is relatively as flat as I will ever fucking need. Language. So I switched to sandpaper because it's faster for cleaning off the sides. And you'll also get to see my favorite thing in the world. What does flat mean? Flat means flat, and almost nothing is. It's insane. I hate that it's the Rick and Morty, like, do you want to experience true flatness? And he takes some time and makes a little thing, and it's like, oh yeah, no, that's real. Look up lapping plates if you want to see what flat is. So I'm just polishing surfaces, cleaning things up, vamping for no reason, getting some of the dicom off, but we are on to heat treating. So up to this point, shape with hand file, polish surfaces that are important, deburr so that you are not using a tool or hardening a tool that's going to cut you. And then I'm using a MAP gas torch. This would be perfectly fine with a propane torch. Getting the tip to a cherryish red. I turned off the light so that I could see the color. It's a little difficult to mess this up, to be perfectly honest. When it's this small, the stakes are much lower. It's when surface areas get much bigger or thinner that usually cracks happen. You can still see me play it safe when I go for the dunk, but this takes a little bit of time. Be patient and heat lower than your point, and then either just dunk it in wholesale or dip it in a few times and then just jam the damn thing into the water, which you can't see because all you see is my hand. It cools off very quickly. And now we check. So this is a very specific file. You don't need to use this file. It is an HR65 test file. That's the word I'm looking for. It won't dig in or scrape anything but just the residue that's on the steel at this point. That's how we check our work and we know that it's functional. And I scratched the bottom just so that I could see it, so that I could see and feel the difference of hardened versus not hardened. Now, I do regret something that I end up fixing later. You don't see me temper it, but I promise that I tempered this to a very light straw color and got it to the point where it is. So let's talk about hardening steel while past Adrian is sanding things. So here's the dealio. Unhardened steel, high carbon. Unhardened high carbon steel. Full sentence. Good job. If it's not hardened yet, obviously it's not hardened. If it's high carbon and it's within a certain range of carbon, you heat it to a critical temperature, and then you dunk it into a coolant, oil or water, and that will cool down, and it will lock the steel in a particular something or other. This is what Google is for, and I am not Googling anything. I just know what it does. and there's martensite and something else. Okay, I'm being a facetious asshole. All I'm saying is harden it, temper it by bringing the temperature up to either 400 degrees. This is supposed to be tutorial like 400 degrees, or until a piece of it that you've cleaned with sandpaper is visibly turning very light straw, or you could get away easily with taking it all the way to sort of like a bluish color when applying heat with a torch very slowly and very as indirectly as needed. I'll show it later. But once it's tempered, that tool steel, or that steel, not necessarily tool steel, is functional. So, in the time that it's taken me to say that, I've I have walked over to a 2x72 inch belt grinder, made the same profile, and in that time of rambling, have basically finished, almost finished this tool. I think I've only sped it up 2 times here. So, it's flat, it's got the shape I want, and now I can start shaping the tool, the part separator on the back. This is not a tool everyone's going to have, so I didn't want to show it first. But you can use something equivalent to this, or probably 20 times cheaper, to get a bench grinder, which is a stone. You have to be very careful with any power tool. Safety rating of all of these things is none of them care about your blood. They will remove your blood from you if you are not paying attention. So, I want that to be very, very clear. I'm not showing any injuries. I don't show injuries on this channel. That's not what this is about. If you've been here for a while, you know that. But tools are only as safe as the person using them. For the love of God, be careful. So I'm making a shallower angle, and this, and now I'm also starting on the thinner ones, and a thinner piece of steel will go, probably, if it's twice as thin, it'll be exponentially faster to work. I'm just going to throw that out there while I'm rambling about safety. So, safety goggles, ear protection. You want to be able to hear when you're 38. Am I 38? Yeah. You're going to want to be careful. And if also breathing protection, because that is throwing ceramic dust into the air, steel dust into the air, and a bunch of other nasty shit that you don't want to live in your lungs for as long as possible. And if you are like, hey, I have a well-ventilated space, I can squint, go for it. I'm not your dad, but your dad would be disappointed if he couldn't see him because he got blinded by a shard of metal. Yeah, that was pretty good. I like that. Praising myself for words that I just said. That's me in a nutshell. Anyway, so this one I decided to be a little more direct with the shape, and I just made something that genuinely looks like a shiv. But in doing this, I found another function for this tool, which I'm pretty happy for, and you'll see it later. Also, when using power tools, just in general, if you already heated something, and if you've heat treated and tempered your steel, a tool doesn't care how hot something is. It will just, it doesn't care if it's hardened. It will ruin that temper very quickly if you're not paying attention. So just be careful. If you see the same colors that you tempered at, you got lucky. If you see something past that, or if it starts to get red hot, you've ruined your temper. Start over. Potentially start over all the way back at the beginning with a new piece of steel, but if you're me and you're a little cheap, you're going to try to use that same piece of steel you just ruined, and maybe it'll work. Anything is possible. Most things are possible. Just keep trying things. It's fine. So yeah. that is another one done. And now for the last one. I wanted to make a fourth just because I had 4 pieces of steel, and I wanted to be a little bit more true to what I saw on the internet. I don't know who's providing that. I don't know the company that's providing that. The part scraper, not a part scraper. It's very specifically something to help widen lines between two parts coming together. It is such a niche tool, and it costs $40. But their version is carbide. It'll never dull. It's made very precisely, and honestly, probably for what it's supposed to be doing, a really good tool. However, if you have a bunch of tools in your garage that you had to convince yourself would pay for themselves over time, you were wrong. And instead, you can spend, I don't know, this is probably like 2 hours if you're judicious and careful. You could probably be quicker, but be safe. If you have the tools, it's kind of fun to use tools to make other tools. So I've got 3 other guys that need points, and there are 2 ways to go about it. You can either hand file it, or you can use a diamond plate. I'm back in the polishing phase. Uh, I tried 4 different shapes for the part separators, but the thing is they all worked, which means I learned nothing. But one thing that the part separator has to be is smooth, because you don't want it digging into what is, it's not the softest plastic in the world, but you can mar it pretty easily. And you can sand it away pretty easily too if you do end up making mistakes, or you're just making battle damage, in which case you're doing great. Switch to sandpaper again for speed. I think this is either 220 or 400 grit. Typically, if you're making something for somebody else or somebody that you care about, when I make something for me, let's not read into that. Um, my goal is my goal for making something for somebody else is to make it as good as I could possibly make it. I don't think I've ever been talking this fast. I have had no coffee. But when I make something for myself, I just want it to work. And sometimes there's some really fun challenges in trying to make something both aesthetically pleasing and functional. I took this to 80% of both, as opposed to a fully functional tool. I made 4 tools that could do the same function slightly differently. Now I'm making the bevels on the diamond plate with this particular piece, but I wanted to show you how fast a coarse diamond plate or even sandpaper can do it. You kind of got to be careful, but since you can control the angle that you're doing things at, and if all you had was sandpaper, you could do this whole project with sandpaper. I would suggest starting with, honestly, a needle point of steel already. If you start with a piece of steel that's as close to your end dimensions as possible, you're saving a ton of time. If I had an anvil and a forge in my garage that I could use that wasn't inordinately dangerous to my entire existence, I would be doing that. I would hammer something to a shape that's as close as I can get it, and then go from there. As much as I wanted this to be a place where I could forge, I don't think it is. So the house has 80% of what I want, and 20% is not a forge. So that's just with a diamond plate. I got it to the shape I want. I got it to the point I want. It's even. It's clean. Even with a diamond plate, you still have to deburr things, but it is heat treat round 2, and I wanted to show you on a thin one how fast this can go. So map gas, which is more expensive to get the torch end for, but the gas itself is not particularly outlandish. Or propane, you want to get it. You want to get it hot, but you can really you can get it too hot before putting it into water or oil. And I'm choosing water, so I'm trying to be as careful as I possibly can. I'm going to try to shut up so you can hear a bit of the difference. But the files shouldn't be able to cut in because it is harder than glass. And glass is harder than hardened steel. It is just more brittle. So if you think about it, if you could get glass to this shape, you'd probably make a tool that would last a long time, but it would also shatter if you ever dropped it wrong. So this is the tempering process that I was talking about. Just short blasts of heat and let it rise to the point. I lowered the torch down, and I'm not doing a great job of displaying it, but you should be able to see the heat creep in the color of the oxidation on the steel. And that is your main indicator for how it's going. The reason that you start below your point is because the surface of the steel could get hotter than the inside. If you start on the surface and then you dunk it in water, all you've done is tempered the outer shell of it, and that's not what you want. If you go too fast, bad. If you go too fast, you're just going to ruin the temper, and then you have to heat treat all over again. And then steel gets weird because the crystallization structure... Oh man, that's not a fun word to say. The crystallization structure inside is very important for steel, and I don't understand enough about it to even begin saying anything other than small is good. So, if you compare that to what the other side was, that side, it's ever so slightly yellow, and I could have gone a bit further, but honestly, if I do this right, I never want to sharpen it again. And I wasn't going to show this, but I was pleasantly surprised that I was able to get the shiv scraper bevels with the power tool. And I don't know why I didn't think that it would work, but I was just... When I tried one side, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is definitely a thing. Hand grinding bevels on a plate like this, or a grinder like this, does take time and touch and attention and care, and honestly, a hand file can get you every result that you ever want any other tool to do. It's just going to be a little slower, but this ended up working. A dagger grind on a single point. And this is aesthetically only to make it look clean. This is a particularly fine belt. It does really nice things. I didn't harden the backs of these, if you'll notice. And I just think it's because it won't need it, not because I necessarily couldn't do it. It should be fine. But this is if you want a very short dive into Trizact belts or structured abrasive belts, that's what this is. It makes a really cool finish, and I like it a lot. That's it. Nothing else. Just getting the gunk off, getting the oxides off. Sandpaper would do this job. Honestly, sandpaper does an incredible job if you're going for polish. Going from 80 to 120 grit, and then going up the grits 150, 200, 300, 400, whatever they sell them in increments. You can get something to a mere polished shine with sandpaper alone that you can't really do with a belt grinder. And if you can, show me, and I will like it. But here we go. These are finished hardened tools. If you follow this and there's anything that I said that you're like, hey, that doesn't make any sense, how dare you? Let me know in the comments. I'm usually not very good at that transition. Just let me know, and I will explain things with more words. Or you could go to somebody competent. That is also something you were capable of doing, but you decided to come here, and I appreciate that. Like and subscribe. Did I do a good job? No? You're leaving? Okay. Perfectly within your rights. So these are our tools. I might have done a little bit more polishing on some back ends of some of these, but it's gonna be the same thing that you've already seen me do. You can spend 2 hours or you can spend 2 days. It's really up to the amount of effort that you want to put into something. And again, if this was for somebody else, I would probably put a full 8 hours into making these as good as they possibly could be. Everything from how they're held, to their profile, to the point, to the angles, to the blurry camera. Good work. It doesn't like focusing on grayscale. But yeah, do what you want for yourself. Do as good as you can for others. I think that's fair. Just going to hang on that shot. Okay, so we do need a Gunpla for this, and very short for the people who came here for the tool part that just checked out. This is Gunpla. It stands for Gundam Plastic, I think. And I've made probably 100 of these little guys, and I wanted to make a new one so that I would have something to test on fresh that I haven't touched or done anything else to. So I'm just very carefully going to put it together. This should be straightforward. If when you're making Gunpla it doesn't look like this, I don't know what you're doing. I just don't. This is the only way to do it. It's in the instructions. I have them up so that you can see them. Everything on there says to do it like this. Anyway, I am an animator by trade. It is what I do. Everything else that I do has now come together and culminated into a series of hobbies that I enjoy greatly. I have another channel that is all this. It's all animation, art, etc. And I have been greatly enjoying doing stop motion animation for Gundams. It's fantastic. If you haven't seen any Gundam shows, start with Mobile Suit Gundam or any one of them. Just pick and go nuts. And if you pick wrong, that's on you. There's no wrong way to enjoy your time as long as it's with Gundams. And this is a Zaku. It's not even a Gundam. It's a mobile suit, and I know that. Not pictured. I put this little guy's waist on backwards, so that was fun. Uh, anyway, so full disclosure, the set's changed a little bit. Don't worry about that guy. He's fine. He's fine. He'll show up later. Go to my other channel if you want to see. If you want to see that, I'm awesome at cross promotion. So, specifically, this tool is meant to widen gaps between parts that have been put together so that you can make panel lines and stuff like that. So the wider chisels are a little bit better for this. And if you look carefully, you should be able to see the little scrapes of plastic coming off. And in a model for these kind of details, that is honestly enough. It doesn't need to be overboard. It just needs to be visible. So the shank tool does not work as good in this case. It actually works better for a different scenario. We'll get to that. But the thick guy, it can touch both sides of this gap and make it a bit more pronounced for small visual details. And while I'm not good at two things. I'm not good at sort of like perfectionist kind of things. It's something I'm struggling with. Now I actively fuck up and I try to separate the part while it's being held together by two other parts. That's on me. But that little scrape right there, battle damage. Perfectly fine. If I hated it, I could fill it in and sand it down and be perfect, and I was just in the middle of saying I'm not good at being perfect. Make a perfect cube? No, that's not me. Make a relative block? Absolutely. Now, when fingernails don't do, come at it from both sides with a little part separator, and let's see if it works. I'd say that works. So, uh, past me has a lot more enthusiasm because he just spent a lot of time scratching his model. But let's show what the shank tool is really good for, because this has two sharp edges that can act as a scraper, and this is a parting line from the mold making process. So these are injection molded high impact polystyrene, I believe, and I think it's polystyrene, but it's relatively soft and it scratches away pretty easily and pretty cleanly. And this tool has edges that you could use if you didn't want to spend hours and literally thousands of dollars worth of tools doing this and making this. You could use a 10-cent X-Acto blade to scrape this little extra bit off. Just had a life affirming moment. But all that being said, this little tool does three things, so I could use 30 cents worth of X-Acto knives. But after you scrape it down, you can then buff it or sand it ever so slightly to get rid of the tool marks, and it worked out great. I'm really happy with it. I'm happy with how it worked. I'm happy with how it feels. Uh, the point of it does get used next. But yeah, that works out. And you can polish your nails with those same buffing things I found out, just in case you would like to do that. So I've taken a piece off of the skirt, which I believe it is called legitimately. Now, here is the thing. So clean off the tip. It's a fine point. It can get into very minute details. And then using the flat side, you can see a curl of plastic coming up. If you're a tool guy or a tool person, you can see the sort of spiral as it goes, and that right there is the sign that the tool is working cleanly. It's one unbroken ribbon. Even if it was broken, I mean, it's still probably fine. But now this is panel liner. I think it's Tamiya black, but it flowed extremely easily. It's just a little bit darker than it would be and a little bit harder to rub off in the case of you're handling it or you haven't got a chance to clear coat it yet. Deeper into model making than I have. This is an example of one that I did not do it on, and it took just a little bit more and didn't look quite as good. So same deal. This one, uh, good job. Uh, the one on the right, I hadn't used the tool on, and the one on the left, I have, and it flowed nicely. So now I'm just kind of finishing up a little detail pass. I don't go too hard or too heavy into it, but it worked out pretty good for what it's worth. I like these little tools, and when I have time to pretend that I can make one of those really awesome 100, 200 hour Gundams that takes a significant amount of effort and custom panel lines and all that, I'll have four tools that can all do relatively the same thing, kind of. Someday. This is not turning into a Gunpla channel. That's what the other one's for. But there will be more model kits and stuff like this. I've also been thinking of other tools that I could make, because they make very expensive, very tiny, very precise chisels. But I was wondering, I saw somebody else show a 90-degree angle tool, and I was very curious about that. Also, this is a little magic sponge that I was using to clean up the excess. So that's it. I have rambled for almost 40 straight minutes. Thank you for watching. Our little guy in the back, he's just there to cheer you on. He's having a good time. Nothing. So yeah, I appreciate you coming by, and sorry for any delay in getting this out. It's just been very hectic, and I had a project that I had to make for a couple of weeks that I couldn't share any of or record, but Anyway, thank you for watching. Do YouTube stuff if you liked it. Comment if I said something wrong or if you want to add more of your own information or knowledge. Both are cool, both are important. And bye.